This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast and are not intended to malign any religion, group, club, organization, business, individual, anyone, or anything. I'm Sarah Edmondson.
And I'm Anthony, air quotes nippy, Ames.
And this is A Little Bit Culty, a podcast about what happens when things that seem like a great thing at first go bad.
Every week, we chat with survivors, experts, and whistleblowers for real cult stories told directly by the people who lived through them.
Because we want you to learn a few things we've had to learn the hard way.
Like, if you think you're too smart to get sucked into something culty, you're already prime recruitment material.
You might even already be in a cult.
Oops. You better keep listening to find out.
Welcome to Season 6 of A Little Bit Culty. Welcome back, everybody, to the follow-up with our personal hero, Claire Headley.
The redo.
If you haven't heard part 1, I recommend rewinding and going back and listening.
I don't think you rewind podcasts, but yeah, you get the gist.
Let us know what you think on Patreon and Instagram or wherever you listen to podcasts. Enjoy! Okay, everybody, welcome back. We had a little break with our guest, some time to percolate on this incredible story.
Heal our sick children.
Heal our sick children, which is why we just stopped last time. But we were so excited to find out what happens next in this. It has to be a movie, Claire. If you don't turn it into a movie, I'm going to make it into a movie. So that's putting the fire under your butt. Okay, so you're in the bus station.
In Vegas, right?
In Vegas.
Yeah.
They meet you there because they're crazy. And then what happens?
Yes. So before I get back into the story, though, I have to fill you in on something that I learned, that it's crazy that I had never put these pieces together previously. But I guess it speaks to the level of isolation of the world that I lived in. It turns out that the day that I escaped was the 19th anniversary of L. Ron Hubbard's death, which he's the founder.
Wow.
And yesterday was my 19th anniversary of escaping. How crazy is that?
That's crazy. And so perfect that we're here in the podcast to tell us
I know
all about it. So you escaped 19 years ago yesterday.
Yes. And Mark
Wow.
and Mark was traveling yesterday, but on our YouTube channel, Blown for Good, we did a whole Google Maps flyover, talked about the whole thing as we've done here. So anyway, it's just crazy. And I'm so grateful for every single day of freedom I've lived since that moment.
Oh my God.
But yes, so I was in the Vegas bus station. It was just so earth-shattering to have them apprehend me, or know that they had caught me, basically, for all intents and purposes. And in that moment, it was seriously what do I do? So as I said, I sat down on my purse and just kind of figuratively closed my ears. Greg Wilhair is David Miscavige's henchman and has been for many years. And he was the main person there. But there were also 3 other people there whose sole purpose was to drag me back. And, it was Greg threw everything at me. You're ruining your family's life. You're never going to talk to them ever again. Just the whole list of all the many reasons. And I just could not. I knew if I gave in that moment, I literally would just never see Mark again. I would never be free. I would never have a chance to live the life I've always wanted to. So anyway, I sat on my purse. They threatened to follow me on the bus. They didn't. I got on the bus, and of course, the first thing I did was turn on the organization phone that I had with me, because cat's out of the bag on where I was. And I called Mark and told him I'm coming. Because actually, Greg had called Mark when we were talking in the bus station and said, we've caught her, she's not coming. So of course, Mark was sitting in Kansas City, just losing his absolute mind, going, what?
I have a question. When you said they were throwing everything at you, they will do the psychological abuse, but they wouldn't like pick you up and throw you in the car, right? Like they wouldn't, because you're in public?
I didn't know. That's why I sat on my purse, so that if they tried to drag me out of there, I could scream and hope that someone might call 911. And it's funny, when Mark and I were talking about this yesterday, it occurred to me how crazy it is that in that moment, I didn't call 911, which just speaks to the level of programming that the police are, a Scientologist believes they're never to call the police ever, as has been talked about many times now, particularly in the case of the Danny Masterson trial. It's absolutely forbidden to call the police. And so even in that moment where I was at risk of being kidnapped, it did not occur to me to call the police, which, again, in retrospect.
And how many people were there waiting for you?
There was 2 in the bus station, and then there were at least 2 in a car outside. I couldn't see those. It was nighttime. So to be fair, I don't actually know, but I know that they at least made reference to 2 people outside. There may have been more than that. I don't know.
And so was the threat of violence there in your mind? Like,
absolutely.
Did you feel, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
100%. I knew of instances where people had been in the midst of trying to escape. And for example, like a woman was walking down Highway 79 in Gilman Hot Springs to try and escape. It's very, very isolated there, but nonetheless, they pulled up in a van and just shoved her in the van and took her back. So I absolutely knew that they had done this before. It was a little different being that we were in the Vegas Greyhound bus station. But even then, it was a Monday night around 6:30 p.m. There wasn't a whole lot of people in the bus station. So I didn't know what was going to happen, honestly.
Tell us about the reuniting with Mark. How did that happen?
Oh my goodness. So I called Mark and said, so now I'm sitting on the bus ready to go, and called him and said, okay, I'm on my way. And he's like, oh my gosh, what happened? And, I told him everything that happened, which he had a good idea of.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, so you got off your purse and you just like walked away from them? Like I missed that moment.
So people were starting to line up for the departing bus.
Okay.
So I had to stand up and get in that line, but now there was people congregating. So I'm in the line. They're still talking to me the whole time, like going, what if David Miscavige was here? I'm like, well, he's not, thank goodness. And anyway, like, what kind of a comment is that? Like, even more so I'd want to leave.
So you were talking back to them. No, in your head.
This was in my head,
okay.
my mental conversation, like, because I know what the tactics that they use. They know the programming that I'd had since birth. So they knew exactly what to say to make me question myself, make me doubt myself, make me go, oh, well, I should talk with them, and maybe I should, like, just even that. I knew that if I let in even one sliver of doubt, that I was going to fail in my attempt to get out of there. I just knew that. So it was in my head. I just had to shut them out and just not engage. And so yeah, it was a little bizarre. Like, I'm waiting in line to get on the bus. I have Greg Wilhair and this other woman named Sharon Johnston just kind of standing there talking to me the whole time. Greg threatened to follow me on the bus, but I knew that because I had intentionally planned and timed my escape to coincide with David Miscavige being in Clearwater, Florida. And I knew that because of that, there was going to be a delay on them getting approval from David Miscavige on what they could or could not do. So I knew that for them to follow me even further would require approval. Anyway, it's complicated, as is everything with Scientology. But
well, they have a decision to make too, of like, do I escalate this in the Vegas bus station and then draw more attention to us? So you're in, maybe you didn't feel that way, but you were in kind of safer ground, it seemed like, right?
Yeah, in retrospect, yeah. And you're right. It definitely didn't feel like that in the moment. It was pretty shocking. Like, I, for sure, even with everything I knew, I just never thought they would go to such extremes to chase me down. I mean, it's insanity. Anyway, so yeah, they threatened to follow me on the bus. They didn't. I got on the bus, and that's when I called Mark and said, okay, I'm coming. And he was lost his mind. And then about a day later, I made it to Kansas City, and he was there to meet me, and, we hugged, and it was like, the first day of the rest of our lives.
Wow.
And it really was. Like, we'd been married for 13 years, but that was like day one of real life.
Right.
It's just crazy.
Wow. 19 years ago.
Yes, yes, I know. The rest is history. We've come a very long way. That was the day the process began of unraveling the 30 years of programming I'd had being born and growing up in Scientology. And it's been quite the journey that I'm continuing on to this day.
Wow. Well, how do we summarize 19 years into an hour? Like what are the things that you think would be most useful for our audience to know in terms of your and the topics I'd love to cover loosely so we can time it out is A, your healing journey, B, what you're doing with your advocacy with the Aftermath Foundation, and I'd love to touch on the Masterson trial if you don't mind, if you're allowed to.
And then
Yes.
I'd like to hear like where we are in terms of Scientology's trajectory, and are you optimistic that it's gonna
So 4 topics?
see its fate?
Yeah.
Ready, go.
Yeah.
All right.
Healing journey.
Well, yes, healing journey. So, wow. Yeah. I mean, so that day arriving in that bus station, I had $40 in my pocket. I had my husband back, and that was it. That's what I had. I had nothing to my name. I had no resume. I had no education. I had no, because my family moved to the US when I was 13 years old and never put me back in school. So while I've studied Scientology over 10,000 hours and was on the upper levels and all this other nonsense, in terms of real world education, I had very little of anything. So starting over with that was a long, fortunately, my husband, Mark, had, he's always been audio visual skills inclined and computers and all this. So he didn't have much trouble pretty much getting going right away, making pretty decent money. But we had to get an apartment, get a car, get a job. And it was so funny. I talk about this like 3 days after I'd arrived in Kansas City. I started applying for jobs. And so I went to a local pizza restaurant and applied for a job there. And they said, oh, come in for an interview. So Mark took me, we drove there, and he was waiting for me outside, and I did the interview, and they were like, well, yeah, great. We love it. Can you start Monday as a waitress? I was like, yeah, great. I'll be here. And I walk outside and I tell Mark, I'm like, I got the job.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, oh, that's amazing. Congratulations. He's like, how much are they going to pay you? I'm like, I forgot to ask. More than $46 a week. That's for sure.
Anything. Wow.
Anyway.
And you did that for a while, pizza job?
No, I did that for 6 weeks. And then I was hired as kind of an office manager for this woman that she was such a blessing, an amazing lady. She's no longer with us. She is my oldest son's godmother. She was a friend of my father-in-law's, and she hired me. She had an equine insurance company in Missouri. And so I worked for her for 3 or 4 months. And then Mark ended up getting a job offer back in LA, which ironically later we found out was set up by Scientology and OSA so that they could keep tabs on us more closely.
Wow.
Anyway, we'll get into that. So we ended up moving back to LA in
amazing.
September of 2005. So we escaped in January. So by September 2005, we were back in LA.
And that's when I moved
I was
to LA.
also really?
Yeah.
There you go.
At the same time.
Yeah. It was August of 2005, but around the same time.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were living in Burbank, California. And by this time, I was now pregnant.
Wow.
Yes, I know. Amazing. So, that's the other part. Like, obviously the heartbreak of a huge part of my heartbreak was the fact that I was forced to have 2 abortions during the time that I was in the Sea organization. It's something I will never recover from. It's just,
I'm so
no matter
sorry.
how many times, I know, it's just, but so I knew that I would never, I never imagined that I would be able to have children. So because of that, and because I didn't see a way out of Scientology, it seemed like an impossible task that I could never accomplish because of the levels of, again, born into it. I knew if I left, I'd never see my entire family ever again. None of those are easy decisions.
No.
And they're not like, it's especially when I was younger, it seemed unimaginable, the thought that I could possibly ever get out. So anyway, so I was now pregnant with my son. And so right around this time, I think now, well, a couple of months after this, Mark had started kind of researching and looking into what was on the internet about Scientology. I knew he was doing this. It was honestly scary for me at that moment in time because I knew the path he was going down and I didn't think anything good was going to come of it in that moment. And it was scary to me because I knew that, like, my concept at that time was just shut the door on Scientology, lock it, throw away the key, all the trauma, all the everything I'd lived through. I just wanted to be done with it and start over, like, clean slate. Of course, in reality, you can't do that. That's not how life works. That's not how you deal with trauma. It's not healthy. But I'm just saying in that moment, that's kind of where I was at. But Mark started posting anonymously on the internet as blown for good. Blown is the term in Scientology meaning escaped. Or unauthorized departure is, the exact direct Hubbard quote. So blown for good, meaning he's never going back. And of course, we're both blown for good. But so he started posting anonymously just to correct some of the outrageous stories that were online with the true stories. There's nothing like the truth is far more outrageous and damning. Yeah, exactly. Like, the physical abuses we witnessed of David Miscavige beating up staff and, on and on and on, all the things we'd witnessed. And also around that time is when South Park came out. So Mark watched South Park. And because I had been on OT level 5, whatever, operating Thetan level 5, there's 8 of them. So of the upper levels, it goes up to 8. And I had been on 5. So he watched South Park and he's like, is this for real about the upper levels? Like they, said what the material was and what you'd learn about and Xenu and all, body Thetans and all this other stuff. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, seriously? Wow. And I'm like, yep. He's like, that's it. I'm going to read all of the levels all the way up. If I die of pneumonia tomorrow, then I take it all back. And Hubbard was right. because in Scientology, Hubbard said, oh, if you're exposed to these levels before you're ready, then you'll die of pneumonia. Well, Mark disproved that theory.
My pneumonia.
One of my favorite parts, I think it was Going Clear. Who's the filmmaker from Canada that was in Scientology? What was his name?
Paul Haggis.
Paul Haggis. They build up the levels and all that stuff. And Paul Haggis is pretty calculated in his interview for a majority of the documentary. Like, he's very articulate, diplomatic when he's talking about it. And he just looks at the camera and goes, what the fuck are you talking and he breaks character when he's like, you're telling me all this time Thetans, and it's like and he just goes off. I just thought it was one of the first documentaries I watched when I got out, and his response was so good. I just thought,
well, that was so much you too, right? Like, what the fuck?
I know. It was just like, but it kind of surprised me because he's very intellectual and calm, and then he just bursts out with that. It was such a great contrast.
Yes, no, absolutely. Yeah, because you're never allowed to talk about it. Even if you have in Scientology, even if you are also on that level, you're not allowed to discuss it or compare notes because
you're probably going to say that to each other.
Exactly. Can't have that.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's so good. This podcast wouldn't happen without our amazing, supportive, generous patrons. Are you with us? Come find us over on Patreon at patreon.com/alittlebitculty for bonus episodes, exclusive content, and the occasional Zoom with our fan favorites from our past episodes. It's a lot of fun over there, people.
The Frankies were a picture-perfect influencer family, but everything wasn't as it seemed.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here asking for help. He's emaciated. He's got tape around his legs. Ruby Frankie is his mom's name.
Infamous is covering Ruby Frankie, the world of Mormonism, and a secret therapy group that ruined lives. Listen to Infamous wherever you get your podcasts.
Meals bring people together, but for many families, providing their next meal can be a challenge. You can help by participating in Macy's annual Feeding the Hungry food drive. All proceeds go toward local food banks and families. Now through January 31st, you can purchase an icon in-store or online, or watch out for the blue Feeding the Hungry shelf tags, where a portion of your purchase will be donated to local pantries. Together, we can combat hunger in our local communities at Macy's.
Break time's over, people. Let's get back to this episode of A Little Bit Culty. It's a good one.
Did you ever do any specifically cult deprogramming or therapy? And you must have had CPTSD from all of this, I'm guessing.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's something I'm still working on. The first time, and so it's ironic too, just backing up for a second, that growing up in Scientology, the only thing I ever knew about psychology or psychiatry is that they're evil.
Right.
You know, they're like the Antichrist of Scientology, or whatever you want to, however you want to say it. It's like the big bad guys. That's the enemies of Scientology.
Right.
And so the first thing I did is I just started reading books. Like I just decided, well, look, you know, I can decide for myself if I want to believe something or not. I was just in this very fragile, like, don't tell me what to think. I'm not really ready to be speaking out or anything else, because I still was holding on to a thread of a hope that one day I might be able to ever speak to my mom again, my sisters, my brother. You know, I love my family. That hurt really, really bad. But I thought, you know, I could read a book. What's wrong with reading a book? So I got Barefaced Messiah by Russell Meller. And another book I read is called Madman or Messiah by Bent Corridon. And then I just started reading other books from there, including Trauma and Recovery, which is one of the primary original texts on PTSD. And so I just started on this path of realizing that everything I'd pretty much been taught my entire life, and from Scientology's perspective, was a lie and intended to manipulate me and control me and prevent me from leaving. And then also build up this structure mentally that meant that eventually I was doing the work of keeping myself in this trap, not Scientology anymore. You know, the smoke and mirrors of, like, for example, I can't have a critical thought because that means I've done something bad. So therefore you just shut down any critical thoughts about Scientology. And it's just insane what it does to your mind. And it's really quite something to unravel that and walk it back.
Right.
But I did eventually realize, yes, I need to talk to a therapist. I need to work on this. I need to do the work of really understanding, because it just struck me, like, being that I was born into it, I don't know what my pitfalls are. I don't know what how do I evaluate, like, what am I not seeing? Like, it's not like I had a previous clean, slate.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
And Claire, like, I know there's two tenets that overlap between NXIVM and Scientology. One being that you're you're never a victim, right? You're responsible for everything. And the other tenet of not being critical, we called it speaking with dishonor, like you speak with honor. So anything that was like, I don't know if this is right or whatever, like, then you're a suppressive, which is right also from Scientology. So, like, those two things.
Wait, you have suppressives?
You didn't know that?
Yeah.
No, I don't think I did.
Yeah.
Or if I did, I forgot about that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So we're all suppressives then.
Oh, we are all suppressives. Yeah.
Yay.
We are all suppressives.
I think it was more predominant in Scientology than it was in ours.
It didn't quite mean the exact same thing, but, like, if you were basically somebody who was against what we were doing was a suppressive, that's what would overlap.
Well, the distinctions were, in Scientology, you were a suppressive person, and it was extended to your personhood.
Which could happen in the ESP too. But generally, it was a suppressive
pretty
tendency.
Bad. And you had a suppressive strategy, meaning, like, when you saw someone do well, you felt bad. And that was something that you could evolve.
Like, if you rejoiced at someone's, like, Schadenfreude is the word for it, right, in German? If you feel good with someone, like, being sick or something, that would be like a suppressive thought.
But you weren't a suppressive person because you had that.
You'd be a suppressive person if you took the fall. The fall is when you just learned that you could do bad things and get away with it and feel good about it. That, AKA a sociopath, which is what Keith was doing, and we didn't know. But yeah, so there's some suppressive overlap. But anyway, those particular
Interesting.
tenets, I do think is really interesting, because I remember people who were getting out and not doing any healing work were still speaking in at cause languaging. Like women I knew who got branded, they were like, well, I chose it. And I'm like, no, you didn't.
Yeah.
You did not choose it. You were lied to. You were coerced. You would never have chosen this.
You even had moments of that.
I
when
even
you
had
were
moments of it,
like,
yeah.
You were like, no, Sarah, they branded you with Keith's initials. We're taking this thing down.
Yeah.
We're
Well,
napalming this place. Like,
my goodness, I know.
It's so good that you were able to find help to unravel that stuff.
Yes.
And were you also like working with other Scientology members at that point?
So Mark and I started helping people. Gosh, I think the first time was 2006. And we just started bringing people together. And Christmas 2006, we had our first ever SP party where we had like 40 people come over to our house. And it wasn't super clear to me in that moment, but it's become clear to me in retrospect that when people would leave or escape Scientology, OSA, the Office of Special Affairs, which is the spy wing, that's who oversees all the fair gaming of any whistleblowers, any media who speaks out, anyone who even just makes a joke about Scientology, which we'll get to that. But that's who oversees all of that. And they have dedicated people whose role and intent is to isolate former members, to never have them come together, never have them talk. It's like they didn't want the strength in numbers. And so like if you look now at the number of brave people speaking out on YouTube and podcasts, and I mean, now there's, hundreds of people, if not thousands, that have spoken out about Scientology. But at that time, it was still very much, I thought OSA had power and could do really, really bad things to me. And in some respects they did. And we'll talk about that. But either way, so we started bringing people together. We would find people who had escaped and they were trying to reunite with their family. Like we flew one guy back to the US to help him reunite with his mother and help people get jobs. And we just kind of started doing what was right to us, is to help people get on their feet, because it's really, really hard to start life over again after such extreme isolation, oftentimes being cut off from your family, oftentimes no formal education, definitely no resume.
Yeah, there's no track record of your skill set, even if you can demonstrate it. So it's very like you have to establish that. And oftentimes that is starting at the bottom. And that's tough, especially later in life.
Yes.
So yeah, that was the hard part. My resume had sex cult on it.
I know. I said that. Like, what am I supposed to do? Hi, my name is Claire. I was in a cult for 30 years. Please hire me.
Yeah. It's like, start tomorrow.
I work really hard. I promise.
We're sure
I work
you do.
really long hours. I do well with stress.
And you work for free. I see.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I know. No references, no anything. It's crazy. Anyway, so that's when that kind of started. And later, so now we have a series Mark is doing on our YouTube channel called The Spy Files. So we now have the documents that Office of Special Affairs was writing at this time when we were fresh out, when Mark had just started posting as Blown for Good from Mike Rinder.
Yeah, Mike Rinder.
Because Mike was still in at this time.
Nice.
Well, no, we didn't get them at the time. We got them several years later.
Gotcha.
Got it.
But it was just crazy to see, like, they were sending people to our house posing as friends to literally go through our office while Mark was having a birthday party at our house. And for example, and they concocted this whole theory that the reason Mark was posting about Scientology is because he was quote unquote jealous of Tom Cruise. And this was like Suri was born 6 weeks after our son.
Oh my God.
And so literally, listen, they had a picture of my son, my newborn son, in one of these reports that they had sent to David Miscavige, alleging that he was sickly. He was my first child. He had cone head. He was perfectly fine. It makes me so mad. My
ahead.
blood pressure goes up like,
So they were really like, they really were
Good
spying on you.
God.
yes, they were stealing our trash. They had records in these documents of like every single phone call we made, who we talked to, what we said. I mean,
So they tapped your phones?
yeah, they did.
So
How
where
do
are
they do that?
What's going on? How do they have all this special
Because they're
ops
$1 billion
stuff?
tax exempt cult that the IRS has granted tax exempt.
I guess we're not
status
saying
to.
allegedly anymore.
Yeah, well, sure, allegedly, not allegedly, whatever your opinion is, you're entitled to
No,
it.
I mean, when
I'm
we
just
first-
saying, by my experience
Yes.
reading these documents, I'm like, wow, look at this. They're spending a lot of money just tracking me, a brand new mom with a newborn baby. What the heck was I doing?
Right.
I barely
right?
even had gotten my feet on the ground. And okay, my husband posted some things that happened.
Mhm.
And this is the result. This is the retaliation.
So crazy.
Wow.
No, I was just
So
laughing because
crazy.
when we first started this podcast, we were so afraid of being sued, and we're like, allegedly, the cult-like organization, and come at me.
Right.
But you're right. It's even in the last 3 years, more people are speaking out about it. We must be low-hanging fruit to them.
I mean, hey, listen, it's not something to laugh about. It's
Right.
very
No, I
serious.
know.
In fact, literally yesterday, so I put together a declaration that was actually just filed in Leah Remini's lawsuit. And in that declaration, I mentioned that I found out so let's see, today's Thursday. I found out on Tuesday that as of right now, Scientology is paying for Google ads to promote their hate site on Mark and I. They're not even, again, like to this day, 19 years later, they're paying for ads to promote their hate sites that are full of lies about my husband and I to try and destroy our reputation.
Where they're driving
and try
traffic
and-
to you.
Right. Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
They're your
I know.
Google ads at this point.
Yep. Every dark cloud has a silver
Yeah.
lining. That's the silver lining. Hey, come on over to our YouTube channel, or we have a podcast. Mark's book is on Audible. He recorded it a couple of years ago now. So it's in he did his book, Blown for Good Behind the Iron Curtain of Scientology. Anyway,
That's awesome.
it's just
I need to read
layers
that.
of insanity.
I've seen some stuff where they like show up, have cameras going through your stuff. How have people not like fought back or done anything
people
like
are now.
like physical, like because they come into your space and like if I saw some guys going through my trash and I got my kids, like I don't know how I'd react. I don't know who these people are. Like, is anything like that ever happened? Where like
It's gotten physical?
Yeah, that's somewhat their intention.
it's
though, is
provocative. Yeah, I mean.
That's absolutely their intention. Like
They want you to hit them.
They want you to react. They want to engage and have something that they can try and use against you. Like one example though for me and how I reacted is actually two. Number one, in 2008, there's two things that happened that changed my trajectory and was my line in the sand where I was like, that's it. Yes, I'm afraid of these people, but it's more important to me to stand up and expose the truth for my sake, but more importantly for the sake of my children, because I don't want my children to ever think that it's okay to let a vicious bully do this to you. Gets me choked up every time.
Gets me fired
Yeah.
up.
We're with you.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So in 2008, Mark was invited to Germany. He went with Jason Bigay and Amy Scobie, Hannah Whitfield Eltringham, a lot of some other former Scientologists to attend a conference with Ursula Caberta, exposing to the EEC delegates at the time, like all the European officials, the dangers of Scientology. And so obviously OSA and Scientology knew that Mark was in Germany. They had private investigator following. Mark and Jason Bigay were traveling together. They had a private investigator on them the entire time. There's no question they knew Mark was in Germany. Sunday morning rolls around. I'm home alone with a 2-year-old and a 3-month-old baby. By this point, we had 2 sons. 8:00 in the morning, banging on my door. This man comes and he says, I was sent here by the Church of Scientology to ask about your husband's involvement with Anonymous. And I was like gut punched, floored, like, what the heck is going on? And at the time, Anonymous had been protesting Scientology. And yes, we had attended some protests because we don't agree with disconnection. We think it's a vile, evil practice intended to control and leverage people and keep them in Scientology. But Scientology had some theory that Mark was the leader of Anonymous, which nothing could be further than the truth. He's not anonymous, for one.
Yeah. Newsflash.
Anyway, to this day, it makes me mad that I didn't expect this and that I let this catch me off guard. It really was so upsetting. And in that moment, I was terrified. Like, what do I do? And you know what I did? I said, go to hell. I slammed the door in his face and I called the police. And that was the first time I ever called the police. I'm like, finally, I was finally unraveling the programming. And the Burbank police said, was he still on the property? And I said, no. They said, okay, are you afraid for your safety? I'm like, absolutely. These people they're here to hurt me. And I'm alone with my children. They know my husband's not here. Anyway, they were understanding and they policed my neighborhood until Mark got back later that evening.
That's amazing. Way to go,
Wow.
Burbank Police.
Nice.
Yes, I know. Thank you, Burbank Police. And shout out to Riverside County Sheriff's Office, too, because I wouldn't be here today had they not responded when Mark was escaping. And the police report from that is in Mark's paperback book, by the way. But either way, and then the second thing that happened in 2008 was later that year, Child Services showed up at our door. It was like 6 p.m. We were getting ready for dinner. You know, again, my first son was two and a half by then. My middle son was 6 months old. And the gentleman that came from Child Services, he was very polite and kind, but he said, listen, we received an anonymous tip, and by law, we're required to come here. We've investigated it. It's obviously false. But you need to watch your back. Someone's making trouble for you. And I remember in that moment shutting that door and going, someone? No, not someone. This is Scientology. Period.
Obviously.
I can never
Yeah.
prove it, obviously, because of the way Child Services works. But I kept that guy's card. And several years later, I gave it to the FBI. I'm like, I can't prove it, but here.
Mhm. This guy,
Hopefully,
Right.
in that moment, that's when I was like, that's it. All bets are off.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to speak my truth. I'm going to tell my story, and I'm going to keep going until they're no longer getting away with it.
And you're still going.
Right. And they're getting away with it as of 2 days ago with paid ads to promote hate and lies about my husband and I. So yeah, I'm keeping going.
This podcast certainly would not be happening without our amazing, supportive, generous patrons. Are you with us? Come find us over on Patreon at patreon.com/alittlebitculty for bonus episodes, ad-free and exclusive content, and the occasional Zoom with fan favorites from our past episodes, Q&As, and all sorts of goodies. It's fun over there, people.
Meals bring people together, but for many families, providing their next meal can be a challenge. You can help by participating in Macy's annual Feeding the Hungry food drive. All proceeds go toward local food banks and families. Now through January 31st, you can purchase an icon in-store or online, or watch out for the blue Feeding the Hungry shelf tags, where a portion of your purchase will be donated to local pantries. Together, we can combat hunger in our local communities at Macy's.
That's the sound of your current hype level at the gas pump. But brace yourself for something fuel nominal, because Unleaded 88 is about to take the hype to a whole new level. Unleaded 88 is cheaper, cleaner, and greener than regular unleaded. Plus, it's homegrown, making Unleaded 88 the clear choice at the pump and totally worth the hype. So pump it up with Unleaded 88, brought to you by Iowa Corn.
You've heard from our sponsors. Now let's get back to A Little Bit Culty, shall we? What do you think is important for people to know about the Danny Masterson trial, and what was your role in it?
I was approached by the DA's office in, September of 2022 and asked if I'd be willing to testify as an expert witness. And so the reason I was asked is because, number one, I spent 8 years in Religious Technology Center, which is David Miscavige's organization, is the highest organization in Scientology that runs everything and oversees everything. And so because of that, I had personal knowledge and also had extensively studied Scientology policies and like I said, I studied Scientology over 10,000 hours. Not something I'm proud of, but it's a fact that is relevant to expert witness testimony in relation to Scientology's practices. And I don't know any of the Jane Does, for example. They're incredibly brave women who have stood up to this organization against just all manner of huge, insurmountable barriers to expose the truth. And so my hat is off to them always, because I mean, this was really the third trial. There was pre-trial, like they had to testify 3 times.
That's horrific.
So in in the first official trial, it ended in a hung jury. In the second going into the second trial, the defense had changed their strategy to start to question if the events had even happened. And the fact of the matter is there were many reports to Scientology at the time the events happened. And that's where, going into the second trial, whereas in the first trial, the judge had not allowed any mention of Scientology because they weren't questioning that the events took place, the strategy was different. But now through the court, towards the end of the first trial, going into the second trial, that changed, which then changed the judge's perspective. And she allowed the Scientology elements because there were reports and documents, but the language of Scientology is so laden with complex terminology and semantics that for a jury to understand what these reports meant required my testimony. That was my role, was to just explain the basic procedures, the language, and the terms that Scientology uses, how they handle somebody who alleges or reports a crime against them, how Scientologists are not allowed to call the police, all these different elements that played into the facts of this case. That was my testimony. So on May 3rd, of 2023, I gave expert witness testimony outlining concepts like ethics officer, non-interpolation order, which is the Scientology gag order, just explaining the power that a Sea Org member and an ethics officer has over a civilian Scientologist in terms of leverage and control, the concept of victim being a very negative term in Scientology, and also the fact that starting in 1997, following the wrongful death of Lisa McPherson at the Fort Harrison Hotel, Scientology changed their process to remove sensitive words like SA, rape, murder, suicide from any of their reports, so it wouldn't be in their files. They started using code language to protect themselves, as they do.
Mm-hmm. Language, when you mess with language, you can always bury your intent.
Yes. Exactly.
So what was that like for you to play that role for the justice system?
It was never a question that I was going to do it, but it was absolutely, and again, that's where my hat is off to the bravery of these Jane Does, because speaking for myself, I wasn't the victim in this case. I was just speaking of my knowledge, but I'm well aware of the beast that we're up against with Scientology and their tactics. So it was absolutely a very hard thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Did you have to face anyone that you knew in the courtroom? Ex-members or?
Let's talk about that real quickly. So I think it was in February of 2023 is when the judge ruled, yes, Claire Headley can testify as an expert witness. And you know what the defense did? They called a counter witness.
No.
Who was going to testify to counter my testimony. Do you want to know who that was?
Tell us.
My stepfather.
No way.
Oh my God.
Yep. This is the mental, the way they try and get into you and manipulate you and control you. And like of all the people, my stepfather he was never even in the Sea organization. He never even knew physically where I worked for the 14 years that I was at the headquarters, because it was a confidential location that he was not allowed to know. So it had nothing to do with his quote unquote expert knowledge of Scientology. It was 100% intended to get under my skin. 100%. Anyway, he didn't end up being there the day that I testified.
Oh, good.
But which just further proves the point that, that was a tactic from Scientology to try and undermine me and get under my skin and deter me from this testimony. But other than that, so there was not anyone that I knew I did run into the whole Danny Masterson clan in the hallway, but I didn't know them when I was in, and I don't know that they knew who I was because I was at the headquarters, not on a out-facing public profile position during the years that I was in Scientology. It was internal. So I was very happy to have it behind me. But again, do hard things, right? It was the right thing to do.
Stressful, but also rewarding. Important. Yeah, I would imagine.
So, is Rome burning, as you say? Is Scientology burning? And if so, is it on the way down? 5 years, 10 years? What's your forecast? And when did they shut up?
Right. I know. It's a great question. Absolutely. It's on the way down. I think the public awareness is just continuing to gain momentum. I think that the most significant turning points that I see looking back over the last 10 years is, number one, the Going Clear documentary.
Yes, huge.
Based on Lawrence Wright's book, Going Clear, Scientology and the Prison of Belief. And then, of course, Alex Gibney did the documentary. And then Leah Remini, Scientology in the Aftermath, the 3 seasons of that show that did an incredible job of telling the stories of people's experiences in Scientology. So the work that accomplished in terms of public awareness, and then, of course, the massive outpouring of support from that show is what prompted the formation of the Aftermath Foundation in December 2017, which Mark and I are both a part of. I'm now the president. The aftermathfoundation.org is our website. Yes. And we've been able to create some absolutely amazing programs to help people start over. And I'm so grateful to say that we have gained such incredible momentum since the formation of the foundation. We have now an education grant. We have a career counseling program. We have a mental health program. We have a collaboration with law enforcement that we are very actively pursuing.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep, absolutely. And so there are just so many good things. Last year, we were approved for the Combined Federal Campaign, which is a federal workplace giving program for nonprofit foundations. So in the last few months, I've done presentations to Homeland Security, the Department of Defense, the FAA, outlining the help that the Aftermath Foundation provides. And it's just been an amazing journey to really help people and figure out how to help people while also on our own journey of recovery. And so in terms of where this is all headed, it's really hard to say because, the way my husband Mark always puts it is, if you had $1 billion, what would you do to protect it? And that represents David Miscavige and Scientology. There's no question that in terms of public opinion, I think it's going to be very, very hard for them to grow because people do know, even if you look at what's happening on Hollywood Boulevard with the brave people from TikTok just saying, hey, no, don't go in there. It's a cult, deterring people from going inside the test center. Anyway, I'm just saying there's so many things happening. And then, of course, Leah Remini's lawsuit that exposes at great length the practice of fair game and what Scientology does to the whistleblowers, the advocates, the people who are brave enough to stand up and say, no, this is what this organization does. So where it's all heading, I can only hope. But like I said, as long as Scientology is still attacking me personally and trying to destroy my livelihood and my reputation, I'm going to continue speaking out and do whatever I can do to expose this, because it is absolute insanity that in this day and age,
it's crazy
they can get away with this. Yeah.
The stuff I see them do, I can't believe how people hold their water and don't go. I just can't.
I'm also just so surprised that I'm from Canada, but from what I know about the IRS, that somebody powerful isn't like, wait a second, who's got tax exempt? No. I just don't understand why that hasn't happened yet. We think we talked to Mike about that when he's been on our show.
Well, you saw how they got tax exempt, right?
Yeah, but why isn't somebody powerful called? I don't know enough about how it works.
Maybe Scientology might be a little bit vulnerable now because they're putting out a lot of fires. I don't know how you would hit them in their wallet, because one of the things we did with NXIVM was hit them in their wallet.
Yeah,
I know. I think the best example that in terms of comparisons is if you look at how Australia approaches it, they require nonprofit organizations to pass a public benefit test. And Scientology has not been able to pass that test in Australia. Yeah, so that's where you go, okay, what good are they doing? Like, why do they qualify for tax exempt status? And I mean, they've had that since 1993. So you're right. It's high time that somebody...
I don't know who that person is, but should we rate them?
I don't either.
South Park.
Yes.
Let's get Trey Parker and Matt Stone to come up with the test.
Yes.
Those guys are great.
I'll sign a petition.
Those guys are great, man.
I'll sign a petition.
They live in Colorado, I think, so I'll go track them down.
I'm sure they'd love to hear from you.
And we want them on it's actually on our goals list over here. Target goal podcast guests. We want Trey Parker and Matt Stone on this podcast, just putting it out to the universe. Anybody?
Nice. Okay. And we have spy file documents that mention Trey Parker.
No way.
I'm sure.
And the whole South Park thing. It was in some of the same documents about us because it was at the same time. So yes, absolutely. There's some collaboration that should happen there.
For sure. Claire, tell us the story that you're most proud of from the aftermath, like something that the foundation's been able to do that you just like fills your heart.
Oh my goodness, so many. But I will just take a moment to plug our documentary that we put out last year, The Story of Serge Obolensky. Serge is someone who grew up in Scientology, was brought in from the age of 2, and unfortunately, at the age of 19, on L. Ron Hubbard Way, he had a terrible accident in which he lost both of his hands and an eye. And Scientology kicked him out, as they do, and he ended up homeless on Hollywood Boulevard for 10 years.
What?
The story of how we ended up finding out about Serge, I knew of Serge, and Mark grew up with Serge. There was a woman named Carrie Morrison, an amazing lady who has done so much work to help homeless people. She has a nonprofit called Heart Forward LA. She read Mark's book, and in just a complete fluke of coincidences, because Mark's book does not mention Serge Obolensky, Carrie reached out to Mark and I and said, "Hey, by any chance, do you know Serge Obolensky?" Well, not only do we know him, but we also know his father, who had left Scientology many years earlier and didn't know what had happened, or had lost touch with Serge. So we reunited Serge with his dad.
Oh my God.
And then, then through the Aftermath Foundation, we got Serge new prosthetics, new prosthetic hands, a new prosthetic eye. We got him tutoring. He just in June of last year got his GED.
That's awesome.
Our whole family flew out to LA and attended his high school graduation. That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Like, and so the reason I think that like for my kids to see, just it's so important. Unconditional love is really, really important. Be kind to people. We don't know what tomorrow brings, but if we make today good, then that we're making a better world. So there you go. I'm sorry to make you cry, Sarah.
You should start tweeting this, Claire. The Twitterverse, the Twitterverse and Instagram can use this message. There's a lot of
Yes.
How can our audience donate to the foundation? Because it's a not-for-profit?
Yes.
Tell us all those details.
Where can we see the doc, too?
Yes, absolutely. So the documentary, if you just go on YouTube and search The Story of Serge Obolensky, we did just start a dedicated channel for the Aftermath Foundation. It's baby, but it's there now. And our website is theaftermathfoundation.org. We are a nonprofit organization recognized by the IRS. So all donations are tax deductible and are on our website. We have a donate button, and there you go. It's important work. It's important work. And, it does inspire me every day to just know that, yes, we can live through trauma. We can have terrible experiences, but what we do and how we use those experiences to help other people is what matters most.
That's the end of the podcast right there, Claire. I'm going to end on that note.
Sarah, I'm giving you a big hug. I'm really sorry to make you cry.
Happy tears.
I'll hug you.
You're a hero of ours, Claire. Please keep in touch. We're going to put all these things. I also have a resource page on my website, and I don't know why the Aftermath Foundation is not on there. So I'm gonna put that there because we want to support you in whatever way we can.
Yes, likewise. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much.
Sweet.
All right, thank you, Claire.
Take care, Claire. See you next time.
Like what you hear, do you?
give us a rating, a review, and subscribe on iTunes. Every little bit helps us get this cult awareness content out there. Smash that subscribe button. You know you want to.
Okay, dear friends, that is a wrap with our friend Claire Headley.
Loved interviewing her. She's awesome.
Stay tuned to announcements of when we'll be having Claire over on Patreon for a live Zoom Q&A where she will be answering all your questions about Scientology and the trial or whatever you want to know. Stay tuned also for her book one day and all the amazing things she's doing on her website, which can be linked in our show notes. Also, friendly reminder, if you are a subscriber, please make sure that you are still subscribing because Apple kicked a bunch of people off recently, and that really does affect our numbers and how the show is doing overall. So thank you for your support.
Thanks, everyone, for your support.
See you soon.
Bye.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean, I'm hanging on to the weight of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know
Thanks for listening, everyone. We're heading over to patreon.com/a-little-bit-culty now to discuss this episode. In the meantime, dear listener, please remember, this podcast is solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. It's not intended as a substitute for real medical, legal, or therapeutic advice. For cult recovery resources and to learn more about seeking safely in this culty world, check out a-little-bit-culty.com/culty resources and don't miss Sarah's TED Talk called How Cult Literate Are You? Great stuff.
A Little Bit Culty is a Trace 120 production, executive produced by Sarah Edmondson and Anthony Nippy Ames, in collaboration with producer Will Rutherford at Citizens of Sound and our co-creator and show chaplain/bodyguard, Jess Temple Tardy. Our show writer is Holly Zadra, and our theme song, Cultivated, is by John Bryant.
Brace yourself for something fuel nominal. Unleaded 88 is the clear fuel choice. It's cheaper, cleaner, and greener. And it's grown by Iowa corn farmers. Now that's totally worth the hype. So pump it up with Unleaded 88.